With the end of life for Windows 10 upon us, here on Tech Talk, we've been looking at the Linux operating system extensively. We've been playing around with a bunch of different distributions. Well, what if now you've decided that you're ready to make Linux part of your day-to-day computing? You want to install it permanently on your computer, move all your files over, and start using it on a regular basis. Well, in this episode of Tech Talk, we're going to be looking at the easiest and safest way to install Linux on your computer. We're going to set it up as a dual boot where your Windows operating system and Linux exist side by side so you can switch between the two at will. And we're also going to show you how to transfer your data all over from your Windows operating system to your Linux operating system. So the whole key and the point that we're making on this install is to do it the easiest and safest way possible. I'm going to take you step by step through that methodology, and we're doing that right now, right here on Tech Talk. So in this video, we're going to be focusing on what the easiest and simplest way is to install a Linux OS alongside your Windows operating system in your PC. Now, the reason I'm doing this video is I just kind of did this myself actually, and on my work and personal PC that I have up in my office, not only do I have all my own data, my financial data, all my family pictures, everything I care about, but I've also got all the data and information for my employer's business. So for me, when I did this install, the number one thing I was worried about was making sure that I didn't wreck my Windows operating system that I have installed already. Because if something went wrong with Linux, or if I decided I didn't like it, I didn't want to have my Windows install destroyed and have to redo it all over again. So that was concern number one. Concern number two was I didn't want to lose any of my data, and I certainly didn't want to lose any of my employer's data. So I sat down, I did a lot of reading, I gave a lot of thought to how I was going to do this in a way that would basically make sure that I had a successful Linux install and gave me the greatest chance for success without having any issues. So for people like myself that are concerned about that, and especially if you're a little bit newer to doing this kind of work on your PC, if you don't have a whole lot of experience installing operating systems, if you're a little bit nervous about it, I highly recommend that you do it the way I'm doing it today, which is to install your Linux OS on a second SSD or hard drive. So don't install it on the same drive as Windows. Now you absolutely can install Zorin OS or any other Linux distribution besides Windows on the same drive, but it does create more risk of having a mistake that causes you data loss, making a mistake that wrecks your Windows operating system that's already installed, and it does mess with the boot record on your existing hard drive. So by installing your Linux distribution, whether it's Zorin as we're doing today or another one, by installing it on a separate drive, you're basically isolating that Linux install completely from Windows. So it's on a totally separate space. And like I say, that just makes it a lot less likely you'll have an accident that results in a problem with your computer going forward. So for people who are newer to this, for folks who are really concerned about making sure they don't make a mistake that causes data loss, I strongly recommend you do it this way. Now that having been said, there's always the risk of making an error. Things can happen. Either you make a mistake or something happens in your PC that's unexpected and you have a problem. So before going into this, before doing something like installing another operating system, I would recommend that you have a full backup of all your important data and that backup be on a device that is not connected to your computer. So connect it to your computer, do the backup, unplug it, put it on a shelf somewhere. That way you know that data is safe. The second thing is you should probably be fairly comfortable with reinstalling your Windows operating system. Like I say, the way I'm showing you how to do this side-by-side install, it is the safest way you can do it, but it doesn't mean things can't happen. So I'm not guaranteeing you that if you follow all my instructions, everything will work out great. You could make a mistake, you could have a problem with your PC, something could go wrong. So if you're not familiar how to reinstall your Windows operating system if something does go bad, that might be something you want to learn and investigate before you go ahead and install Linux beside your Windows install. Now, having said that, the chances of this going wrong are pretty small. Like installing Windows in a second hard drive, as long as you identify the drive correctly during install, I'm going to show you how to do that, the chances of something going wrong are slim, but it's not zero. So that's going to be my caution for this video. Make sure you got a backup. Make sure you're comfortable reinstalling Windows if you do have a problem and that needs to happen at the end of the day. So without saying any more about the risks and about sort of the backup information you should have prior to getting into this, let's get into our computer. Let's take a look at how we go about doing this dual boot Windows Linux install. So before we go about installing Zorin on our PC, there's a few things we want to do in advance to kind of prepare ourselves for that install, make sure we've got everything ready to go that we need. The first thing we're going to do, down here in the Windows 10 search, we're going to type in msinfo, and that's going to bring up the System Information application. And on the System Information application, there's some information we want to get about our PC before we do the install. The first one is we want to take a look at what kind of BIOS mode our computer is operating in. And there's basically two BIOS modes. One is UEFI, which is a bit more modern, and then there's the old style legacy BIOS mode. Now, if you're in legacy, that's an older system for your basic operating system on your motherboard. You can install Linux, most versions of Linux. You certainly can install Zorin if you're using legacy BIOS, but it's going to look a little bit different than what I'm doing today. So as you can see here on my computer, I'm using UEFI. Most computers made in the last whole bunch of years will be set up for UEFI. So for most of you, this is going to look pretty similar. Just keep in mind if you're using legacy BIOS, it's going to look a little bit different, and it doesn't prevent you from installing Linux though. The second thing you want to make sure of, you want to make sure you know what version of Windows you're running on this computer. And if you look here at the very first line, this machine is operating on Microsoft Windows 10 Pro. And it's important to know that because if, as I mentioned earlier, you do have a problem, you need to reinstall Windows, you're going to need to know what version of Windows you have a license for to make sure you install the right one. So this is Windows 10 Pro. If I have a problem, something happens to my Windows installation, I need to reinstall it, I know I need to install 10 Pro because that's the one I have the license for. So those are two really important things to know before you get started playing around with your Linux install. The other thing you might want to do before embarking on this is you might want to save or to export your favorites and your passwords from your favorite browser. Now, if you're planning on using Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge when you get to Linux, or if you're using another browser that's connected to an online account, often you can sync the browser after you installed on Linux. You can sync it and pick up those passwords and favorites automatically. So that would apply to Chrome, it would apply to Edge if you've saved all that data to your Google account or to your Microsoft account. But if you're like me, you're moving to Linux, you want to do things new, you're looking for privacy, I'm going to go ahead and use Brave from here on in. So I can't automatically sync Brave with Microsoft Edge, which is what I was using before. So what I want to do is export those passwords and export those favorites. And so here's how we're going to do that. We're going to open up Microsoft Edge. And this isn't, by the way, my personal data. I've just put some dummy data into this machine just so you can see how it works. There's nothing here that's confidential. So now we're in Edge. We're going to click these three buttons. We're going to go to Favorites. And then we're going to click the three buttons here at the very top. And what you'll see, there's an option here to export favorites. So I'm going to hit that. And I'm going to export it right into my Documents folder just to make it easy. And you can see here, the document that's going to be generated is just called Favorites, and it's got today's date on it. And we're going to hit Save. Now, the other thing we might want to do is we might want to save our passwords. So the way we go about doing that is we go down to Settings, and we're going to go to Passwords and Autofill, and then we're going to go to the Microsoft Password Manager. And you can see I've just got a couple of passwords that I've set up in here for the information. Again, we go to the three dots, we're going to go Export Passwords, go Export. It's going to ask me for my password. And again, I'm just going to put that in the Documents folder, and this is going to come out as a comma-separated values file. So we're going to hit Save there. So now we've saved our favorites, we've saved our passwords, we've understood exactly what operating system, Windows operating system we're using in here right now. We know we've got a UEFI computer, so you know kind of how you're going to have to set Linux up. So now we can go ahead and download our ISO for the Linux operating system we're using. Now, in this case, I want to install Zorin, so I'm just going to go to zorin.com. And here we see the home page for this Linux operating system. There's a big button that says Download. Now for Zorin, there's two different versions of the operating system. There's a Pro version that comes with productivity tools and a bunch of other stuff. I'm just going to use the core version. The Pro version, you can see it costs about $78 Canadian. The core version is free. There's no charge for that. I've used the core version extensively on my office computer. I've been really, really happy with it. So we're going to go ahead and download the core version. Now it asks you to put in your email address. You don't have to do that. You can just click this link here that says skip to the download. And as you can see, our download of the Zorin OS has already started. So we're going to give a couple of minutes for that to download. We're going to come back and then we're going to make a bootable USB, which is the next step we have to do in getting this operating system installed on our computer. Okay, so there we have it. We've now fully downloaded Zorin OS. We have the ISO file sitting in our downloads folder. And all we have to do is click on the little folder icon from our downloads section, and there we can see Zorin OS right there. So once we've done that, the next thing we have to do is we have to turn that downloaded ISO file into bootable media. What that means, it's media that you can use to boot up to your computer. And for that, you're going to need a USB thumb drive that has at least 4 gigabytes of capacity on it. 8's probably better, 4 is on the skinny side, but Zorin says you need 4 gigabytes minimum. So 4 should work. I'd be more comfortable with 8, but there you go. So what we're going to do, this is a blank thumb drive. I'm just going to put that into an available USB slot. And now we're going to get from the Microsoft Store a program called Rufus. So I've opened up the store. I'm going to type Rufus into the search section. There's the app there. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to hit get. And now that's going to install Rufus for us. If you're wondering what Rufus is, it's a small application. Its entire job is to take ISO files like the one we just downloaded for Zorin and convert it into bootable media onto a thumb drive like this. So Rufus is an important tool anytime you're playing around with operating systems because it really turns that downloaded operating system into something that you can boot from, which you pretty much need to do with any kind of OS installation. So as you can see, that's now been downloaded and installed on my computer. I'm just going to hit open and yes, and close off the Microsoft Store. So now you can see that what we've got, the device that it's identifying is my USB flash disk. Now I previously named this Zorin OS because I had a Zorin OS install on it before. So you can see that that is my flash drive. And it's asking me for the ISO image that I want to now load onto the thumb drive. So I'm going to hit select. And there we go. And now in my downloads folder, here's that Zorin OS file that I downloaded. This is the disk image file for the operating system. So I'm going to click on that and hit open. And so what I've told Rufus here, I've said, I want to take that file. I want to convert it now into a bootable media on this thumb drive that I can use to load the Zorin operating system and installed on my computer. So I don't need to do anything here. This all works. You'll note the partition scheme is MBR and it says target system is either BIOS or UEFI. So if, like I mentioned before, you don't have a UEFI computer, you're working with legacy BIOS, this media will still work if you've got that older style of PC. So we're going to hit start. We're going to hit OK. And we're going to hit yes. And we're going to hit OK again. It's just warning us it's going to erase everything on that thumb drive. And what it's going to do, it's going to go ahead and start writing files and convert my ISO that I downloaded into bootable media on my thumb drive. So once again, we're going to take a pause. We're going to let this happen because it's going to take a few minutes. And we're going to finish installing Zorin OS as a dual boot system on this PC. Okay, so now we can see that Rufus has finished creating our bootable media on our thumb drive. So we are now ready to go ahead and boot our PC to the information that's on that drive. But there's one thing I want to do before that that's going to be really, really important in our install, and that is we want to take a look at our drives and which drive specifically Windows is installed on, because that's going to be important in a minute. So let's close off Rufus, and down here I'm going to type in diskman, which brings up our disk management utility. And that's going to take a minute or two to come up. And so you can see that what I've got here is I've got two different drives in this PC. One is 238.46 gigabytes, one's 238.47 gigabytes. So they're pretty close to the same drive. I can't really tell them apart by size so much. So what I'm going to do, you can see that this disk 1 is all unallocated space. That's the blank drive that I installed in my computer and that's the drive I want to put Linux on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click here where it says Disk 1 and select Properties. And what it tells me is this is an Intel SSD, SC, etc., etc., etc. drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down that it's the Intel SSD SCKK is my blank drive. Now I'm going to do the same thing for disk 0. I'm going to right-click here where it says disk 0. I'm going to select Properties, and that tells me it's a Patriot P210. So I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to say that that is my Windows drive. And of course, I know that that's my Windows drive because when you look here, there's my C drive is here on disk 0. So obviously that's my Windows drive. Now, when we go to install Linux, we need this information to make sure we're installing it on the right drive. Because if we select the wrong drive during the Linux install, you're going to overwrite all of your Windows data, which you don't want to do. So it's really important to have that information before you get started. So now we can close all this off. Now, the next step that we have to take is we're going to have to restart our computer, and we have to enter our BIOS and tell our computer that we don't want to boot from our Windows installation. We want to boot from this thumb drive. Now, if you're not familiar with this process, it could be a little confusing for you. So what we have to do is we're going to restart the computer, and we're going to enter what's called BIOS, the Basic Input-Output System. This is basically the programming that's hardwired into your computer motherboard. When you start your computer, the BIOS is really the first thing to start, and the BIOS decides which operating system you're loading, where it's going to find the boot records, and all that kind of stuff. So the BIOS really tells your system what to do before Windows or Linux ever loads. So we're going to restart, we're going to enter BIOS, and we have to tell BIOS we don't want to load from Windows, we want to load from the thumb drive. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Every BIOS and every PC, I shouldn't say every BIOS, but they're not all the same. I know on this computer, when this restarts, I can hit delete or F2 on my keyboard, and that will enter BIOS. Other computers, it can be F3, it can be F11, it can be other keys. If you're unsure of how to get in, and when we restart, what you'll see on this computer is on the splash screen, it tells you in the bottom right corner what key you need to enter BIOS. Most computers will do that. If your computer doesn't and you're unsure, go to the manual that you got from your computer manufacturer or from your motherboard manufacturer, and that information will be there. If you don't have the manual, search for it online based on the make and model of your motherboard, make and model of your PC, and I'm sure you'll be able to find what key you need to press to enter BIOS. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, we're going to restart this computer, and I'm going to have my finger over the delete key ready to tell the computer I want to enter BIOS on startup. So we can see now that it's restarting. I get a blank screen. Here's my splash. I hit delete. Okay, so here we are now in our BIOS. There's a few things that we have to do to make sure we have a successful Linux install. The first thing we have to do, we want to go to our boot menu, and pretty much everything actually we're going to do is going to be in the boot menu. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to change the boot order. So as you can see, boot option 1 right now is to boot into Windows. So we want to change that. We're going to say we want to boot from our USB flash disk, with Windows Boot Manager being the second option. So what that means is when the computer restarts next time, the first place it's going to look for an operating system is from our flash drive, which is exactly what we want. Now the other thing we want to do is we want to turn off Secure Boot. So we've done that. We have Secure Boot. Now my Secure Boot is already off, and of course these screens are going to look different depending on your computer. Not all BIOSes are the same. I know here in ASUS, because my Secure Boot says setup, it has been disabled, it is not active. Yours might say active, it might say enabled, whatever. You just got to turn Secure Boot off. Now sometimes to turn Secure Boot off, you also have to delete all your keys. So you can see under Key Management, there's this line that says Clear Secure Boot Keys. So sometimes you have to go in, clear those keys, then go back and disable your Secure Boot and make sure it's set to disabled to set up whatever's appropriate for your computer. Now the last thing we want to do in the boot menu is we want to go ahead and turn off Fast Boot, because that can cause problems as well. And so here we see Fast Boot, mine is already disabled. That's exactly what we want. So the three things we've done is we've turned off secure boot, we've disabled fast boot, and we set up our USB thumb drive to be our #1 boot option. Now we're going to go to exit. We're going to say save changes and reset. And what the computer is going to do is it's going to restart again, and it's going to start from this thumb drive and load up our Zorin OS. So let's watch and see what happens there. So here's our motherboard splash screen. So now on this screen, we've got a couple of options. We can try or install Zorin OS. We can try or install Zorin OS with safe graphics mode, or we can try or install Zorin OS with modern NVIDIA GPU drivers. Now, a modern NVIDIA GPU is any GPU that is a GTX 1600 series or newer. Now, I've got a GTX 1660 Super in this computer, but I'm going to install the regular version of Zorin without the drivers for the modern NVIDIA graphics card. And once we have it installed, I'm going to show you how you go about updating the drivers on this particular version of Linux. So what's happening right now is my computer is taking all the information in the thumb drive and it's loading the Zorin operating system into the computer memory. So what's going to happen is this is going to load up the Zorin operating system, but it's not yet installed in my computer. All it is running out of memory. I can go in and I can experiment with it. I can load up programs, I can do documents, I can do all kinds of stuff. But once I shut the computer down again, none of it will be saved because it's just running out of memory. So once Zorin loads up, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to ask it to now install on that blank hard drive in our computer. So here we go. Here's the Zorin desktop, and as you can see, we have two options. We can try Zorin, which means we're just running it out of memory like we are right now off the thumb drive, or we can install Zorin OS. So we're going to go ahead and do the install. Now we're going to select our US keyboard, which is great. And this process does take a little bit of time because, again, everything's coming off the thumb drive, which is a little bit slow. And now we have some options as we go about this install. It says updates and other software. Do we want to download updates while installing Zorin OS? Makes sense. Do we want to install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware? That makes sense because we want to have those drivers. I'm going to say we don't want to participate in the census. And we're going to hit continue. Okay, now this is a really important screen to understand. You have three install options here. The first one is to install Zorin OS alongside Windows Boot Manager. Now, if you only had one disk drive in this computer and you wanted to install Zorin on the same drive as Windows, that's the option you choose. We're not doing that here. We have a second drive. We're installing it on a brand new blank hard drive. The something else is a custom option that allows you to specify exactly where you want to put Zorin OS. It does require a little bit more skill to do that, so if you're not familiar with doing installations of this type, you want to ignore that. What we're looking for is erase disk and install Zorin OS. So what we're telling it is, look, we've got a brand new disk. It's a blank disk. We're going to wipe it out. We're going to put Zorin just on that one disk. So we selected erase disk and install Zorin OS. We hit continue. And now this is the important part. We have to identify the correct disk to install Zorin on. Now, as you can see, when I drag this down, there's two 256.1 gigabyte drives. Now, do you remember a little while ago I said to check out Disk Manager and write down the two drives that you have? So I made a note that my Intel SSD SCKK is my blank drive and the Patriot P210 is my Windows drive. So as you can see here, it's not telling me which drive Windows is on, it's only telling me the drive types. So I know that I'm looking for the Intel SSD SCKK, that's this one here. So I'm now sure that I'm installing Zorin on the correct drive. Again, if I get the wrong drive and I install it on that Windows drive, it's going to wipe everything out, my Windows install, and all my data will be gone. So it's so important you choose the right drive here. So now that we've chosen the drive, we're going to hit install now, and Zorin is going to be permanently installed on my PC. And it's just giving me a warning. Yes, we want to write the changes to the disk. can hit continue. And I'm going to select my time zone. And now this is where you get to put in your account name and password. And it's really important that you keep a track of this information because you're going to need it. And I'm going to make this my test PC for my PC name. So this will be how it shows up on my network. Then I'm going to choose a password. Oops, and you have to hit numlock. And do my password again. And you want to have this button checked off, require my password to log in. Just like with Windows, you want to have a password protected account. And it does help as well when you go to install things, because Linux does require your password for a lot of software installs, updates, etc. So now we're going to hit continue. And now it's going to copy the files and install. Okay, so the install process has now come to an end. As you can see, it says installation is complete. You need to restart the computer in order to use the new installation. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to hit restart now. And it's going to go ahead and restart. Now it gives you a little warning. It tells you to remove the installation medium, which is our thumb drive. So once we remove this, the computer is going to boot now off of my installed copy of Zorin rather than booting off the thumb drive version. So it's told me to remove it. I can safely do that now. I'll press enter, and we're going to boot into our newly installed copy of Zorin. Now once again, as you can see, you've got the option that comes up to either boot into Zorin or into Windows. So we're going to go ahead and boot to Zorin. And every time you start your computer, now that you've got this dual boot setup where you have Windows and Zorin installed alongside each other, every time you start your computer, you're going to see those same options. Okay. And there's my user. I'm going to put in the password I created during the setup process. And there we are. We're now onto our Zorin desktop. So now that we've got that installed, what we can do is we can take a look at the tour. It's going to give you some information about Zorin OS and how it works. If you're familiar with Windows, I don't think there's going to be much here that's too earth-shattering. The online accounts is neat. You can connect your online account to Zorin, whether it's you've got a Google account, you've got a Microsoft account, whatever. It'll pick up whatever you've got in Google Drive or OneDrive. It'll make a directory in your file system for that. It can also, if you're using Thunderbird, it will often, like if you're with Google Mail, Gmail, it'll pick up your Gmail settings and import it into Thunderbird, so it's a handy feature to have. Talks about linking your phone and your computer. That's also another handy feature. And we're just going to go ahead and close that. So now that we've successfully installed Zorin on this computer, we've got it side by side with our Windows installation. What we're going to do is we're going to look at some things that we can do to kind of get this finalized, to bring your personal data into the computer and to finish setting it up so you can go ahead and use it. We're going to do that right now. Now that we have Zorin OS fully installed on our computer, there's a few things we're going to want to do to get it up to date and to make it our own by transferring in our data and personalizing things. Now, what we're going to do here, I'm just showing you basically how to go about it using some dummy data. So this isn't the full thing that you do on your own PC. You're going to have to transfer over your own data based on the way you saved it. It's going to take a little bit of thought. There'll be a few things you'll probably want to do to customize this beyond what I'm going to show you today. However, what I'm showing you is the basic way to move over your information and the core things you need to do just to get Zorin up to date and running efficiently on your machine. So let's take a look at that. So the first thing that I would do now that we've got it installed would be to update the software. And you do that by hitting the little Zorin logo in the bottom left corner, which is similar to your start menu in Windows. And then go to System Tools and Software Updater. Now what Software Updater is going to do, it's going to scan the system and see what components in Zorin need to be updated, what drivers need to be updated, etc. So after the scan is done, it brings us up a message. It says updated software has been issued. Do you want to install it now? And we're going to say yes. We're going to install now and let that do its thing. Okay, now it says the software is up to date, so that didn't take long. We're going to hit OK. So after updating the software, the next thing we want to do is maybe check on our drivers and see what's been installed. So what I like to do is I just hit the little Z logo. Under type to search, I search for driver, and it brings up this application, software, and updates. So we're going to go in there, and we're going to take a look at what we have. So the Zorin software, we don't have to do much with. We're downloading from the server for Canada, which is appropriate because that's where I'm located. This is other software and packages that are in the OS. These are updates, and then this one is kind of where it's important, is the additional drivers. In particular, this is where the drivers for like your graphics card and your wireless Ethernet adapter are going to show up. So let's take a look at what we have here. So right now we've got a sort of generic driver for my NVIDIA graphics card. I'm just going to change this to the most up-to-date one. I'm going to expand this a little bit so I can see it. So what you can see here, the top driver is the NVIDIA driver 580, which is a proprietary driver that's been tested. So I want that proprietary driver because I know for my particular graphics card that's going to work. So I'm going to tick that. I'm going to do apply changes. I'm going to put in my account password. And now it's going to change to that proprietary driver from the sort of generic open source driver. So that's a good thing to check. Okay, so now that graphics card driver has been installed, all we need to do is restart the PC for that to take effect. And select my user, put in my password. Here we go. Now we've got a nicely up-to-date driver. So everything is now up to date. We've updated my graphics driver, we've updated the software, everything's good to go. So what's next? Well, if it were me, a lot of what I do is on the browser. So I'm probably going to want to get my favorites and my passwords in my browser because that's going to make my life a whole lot easier. Now, if you remember, before we installed Zorin, we saved our favorites out of Microsoft Edge. We saved our passwords for Microsoft Edge. So we're going to go ahead and put those into Brave. So we're just going to clear all this stuff here. There we go. So we got Brave up and running. It's ready to go. So what we do in order to bring in our favorites and our passwords is pretty straightforward. We just go to the little hamburger menu here. And we're going to go down to Bookmarks and Lists. And then we're going to go to Import Bookmarks. Now, if you remember, we saved our passwords and our bookmarks in our Documents file on Windows. And the great thing about Linux is when you install it, it gives you read access to everything on your Windows drive. Super duper helpful. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose our bookmarks HTML file. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Windows drive. Because remember, we have Linux on an entirely separate drive. So now we're going to go back to our Windows drive. We do that. Let's just expand this so you can see better. We do that by going to our location marked Other Locations. And you see there's two computers, or there's two volumes here. One is computer, so that's the drive that we installed Linux on. The other says 255 gigabyte volume. That is the disk that we have Windows on. So we're going to click there. We're going to go to Documents and Settings. We're going to go to my Windows user, Tech Talk. And we're going to go to Documents because that's where I saved the file. And here you go. Here's my favorites file that I saved. So we're going to double click on that. And your bookmarks and settings are ready. So we hit done. And you see here at the top of the Brave browser, all of my bookmarks that I had in Edge are now in the Brave browser. Now I can bring in my passwords similarly. I go to Passwords and Autofill, Password Manager. And I'm going to, it says right here, save passwords will appear here. To import passwords, select a CSV file. So we click on that link, We go back to other locations. We go back to my Windows drive. We go back to Documents and Settings, to my user, to Documents, and I've got my Microsoft Edge password. So double click that. And it says 2 passwords were imported to Password Manager, and we can view those passwords. And those are the 2 dummy passwords that I had put in for those accounts. So now I have those in Brave as well. So basically what you've done is you've set your new browser up the same way that you had your previous browser. You got all your favorites, you got all your passwords. For me, I always like to have the home button. I don't know why they never put that in. So we're going to show the home button here. Have that the new tab page. And there you go. Now we go home. There's my home for Brave. There's all of my favorites, and I've got my passwords installed. So basically now Brave is going to act just like my previous Microsoft Edge did in Windows. I've got everything I need to make my life simple. So we're just going to go ahead and close that out. Now that we've done that, the next thing we probably want to do is start moving over our files and folders from Windows. Because we're going to have stuff in there, obviously, we're going to want to use now that we're in Linux. So what I like to do is I like to open up 2 versions of the file manager here in Zorin. So this one, when you're in Linux, everything that you have in terms of your own data, whether it's music, documents, videos, pictures, typically it all resides in the home directory. And the home directory is very much like your user directory in Windows. You can see you've got your desktop, your documents, your downloads, your music, pictures, etc., just like you got in Windows. So it translates pretty well. So there's a couple of things that we have to do to move our data over now. The first, and I don't like to cut. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to copy the data over. So we're going to leave the data on Windows and just copy it into Linux. The reason is if you cut it out of Windows, move it to Linux, sometimes you can have a failure or a hiccup, and then you can lose some of your files, which is never good. Plus, I think it's a good idea while you're first getting used to Linux is to keep all your data on Windows as well. So if you ever need to go back because there's something that you're missing or something you need to do, you can go back into your Windows system and it's just like you left it, nothing's missing. So we're going to go back here to other locations. Going to go to our 255 gigabyte volume. We're going to go to Documents and Settings. We're going to go to my user. And let's say we want to get all my documents. Now these are documents I just put in. It's dummy data just for demonstration purposes. So this is the contents of my documents folder. Your documents folder will likely be much larger and have a lot more in it. But the process is still the same. So what we can do here is simply go ahead and select all of these files. Except these ones here are just links. I don't think we really need that. So we're not going to take these My Music, and I know there's nothing in these. I'm not going to take the My Music, My Pictures, My Videos files. We're just going to take the stuff that actually has data in it. I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to move it to my Documents folder here in my home directory in Linux, and I'm going to go paste. And it's going to paste the folders and files that I had. And that's going to take a little bit of time because even though this is dummy data, I managed to do about 9 gigabytes of it. So there's going to be a little bit of work getting this transferred, so we're just going to wait a minute or two. Okay, so there we have all those filed copies. Now let's go to my pictures and do the same thing. So we're going to go back here and we're going to go to Pictures. This is again in my Windows drive, and I've got these pictures that I saved as well. So I'm going to right click. This is the other way to do it. I'm going to right click on the file manager and go select all, and then right click on one and go copy. And then I'm going to open up my pictures folder here and we're going to go paste as well. And there we go. So everything is now pasted in. So one thing you might want to do when you get in here, if we look at these folders and we go down to, we right click on them and go down to Properties, and we look at Permissions, you can see it says that as a user I can create and delete files. Now, depending on how your computer was set up before, you may have restrictions on your files when you transfer them over. If you're transferring them over from a different user, sometimes they'll be locked. When I did this on my Office PC, they were locked. And what you get is a little orange lock icon on the folder. So if you have that, what you'll find is if you right-click and go Properties, under Permissions, what it'll say is as the owner, you can only view and access files. That's it. So simply all you want to do is you're going to want to change it to Create and Delete Files, and then change permission for enclosed files. And what that does is it gives the same permissions across every file in that folder. So in this example, because of the way I've done this, everything is showed up. I don't need to change permissions at all. But if you do this copy over and you get a little orange lock icon, it means you're not able to create and delete files in that folder. You just do what I showed you. You right-click, you go to Properties, to Permissions, and you just change the permission here to say Create and Delete Files, and then click on Change Permissions for Enclosed Files. And what you're doing is you're telling the Linux system, look, all these files belong to me. I have the right to do whatever I want with them, and that will solve any issues that you can have. But fortunately, when we did it this time, we don't have any problems with permissions, so that's all good. So basically, you can do that with every other file you have in your Windows computer. So keep in mind, this is my Windows computer files here on the right. I can take out my contacts, I can take my downloads, everything that I have in here, I can then transfer over to my Linux operating system, no problem. It's really a very, very simple process to move your data over. So what you're going to have after you've done doing that, you're going to have your Windows system the same way you left it. Your Windows operating system is there. All your data is there. Your applications are all there. You can go back to it anytime you want, which I'll show you in a minute. But then your Linux system, you basically duplicated all the data on the Linux side. And again, I like doing it that way so that when you're first starting out with Linux, if you have to go back to Windows, you can. All your stuff's still there. You've got a double copy of things. So if something happens to your Linux, you accidentally delete something, you've still got it on the Windows side. To me, it's just safer than having one copy splitting between the two operating systems. Now, with all that said, there is one thing about having a dual boot Linux Windows setup that can throw you off. And that is, and it threw me off when I did it, that is that what you'll find is the time when you're going back and forth between Linux and Windows is often off. And that's because the way they record time is different. Your system has a built-in hardware time, and Linux looks at that as being universal time, whereas Windows looks at that as being your local time. So what you'll find often is if you've been working in Linux and then you switch out and go to Windows, your Windows clock is going to be off by several hours. So there is a way to go ahead and fix that. And that is we click here on the Zorin logo, we're going to go to Utilities, and down to Terminal, and we're going to have to put in a couple of commands. So the first one is going to be time, date, CTL. And what this shows us, that command, so it's time, date, CTL, it shows us our local time, our universal time, and our RTC time. So the real time, the RTC time is the one that counts, and as you can see, that is tied to universal time. So there's a code that we can put in that will then put our RTC time linked to local time. And that is time, date, CTL. And we're going to go set local RTC and the number 1. And so what that does is it corrects the system hardware clock to read local time instead of universal time. So if we go time, date, CTL, now you can see that our RTC time doesn't show up as universal time, it shows up as our local time. So now when we switch back and forth between Linux and Windows, the two clocks will be aligned, and you won't have the problem of having one of your operating systems showing a different time than the other. It's a common problem with dual boot setups is that because they don't read the time the same way, being in one and then swapping to the other often makes the clock out. So this is something you want to do if you're planning on using both Linux and Windows on an ongoing basis. Now, if you prefer not to make the adjustment here in Linux, there's a way you can adjust it in Windows. You can search that out. It involves going into the system registry, but there's a way to correct it so that Windows aligns with Linux instead of what we've done here, which is making Linux align with Windows. So now that we've done all that, we've got your new Linux computer set up, we've moved over your files, your Brave browser, it now has all your favorites. You're pretty much up and ready to go. And that is a very, very simple way to go about installing Linux on your PC for everyday use. And so what I'm going to demonstrate to you now is how you go about switching to Windows. So we've been working away in Linux. Now we want to go back to the Windows side for whatever reason. It's very, very simple. We just hit the Zorin logo, hit the power button. We're going to go restart and restart. And then when this screen comes up, we just use our arrows to go down to Windows Boot Manager. We hit enter, and now it's going to start into Windows. And there you have it. There's your Windows installation. You can go ahead and log in. And it's just like we left it. Nothing's changed. Everything's in good shape. And if we go to our documents, all my documents are still there. Go to pictures, all my pictures are still there. It's like nothing ever happened. So there you have it. That's pretty much how you go about doing a Linux Windows dual boot setup using Zorin OS alongside Windows 10. I hope you found that helpful. I know we went through it pretty quick, but I think it gives you what you need to sort of be able to go out and do it on your own and know what to expect as you're going through the various steps. If you're choosing to use Zorin OS, there are great instructions where we downloaded the ISO on their website. They have great instructions that walk you through it step by step as well. Between this video, those instructions, you can't go too wrong. Just keep in mind, having that second drive to put Linux on is just the safest and easiest way to go about doing it. As you've seen, it also makes it easy to go back to using Windows as your primary OS if you so choose. So once again, I'm Graham Hughes. This is Tech Talk. Let me know what you think of this demonstration down below. Did you find it helpful? Are you motivated to use Linux for yourself? Are you a new Linux user and you've been trying it out for a few weeks? How are you finding it? There's tons of people that'd like to hear from you and know your experiences, so put them in the comments down below, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.